we bring you the action from the penultimate round of the 4x4 Mega World Inland Off-Road Championship, the Baberspan Hartsrivier 250, held in the Northwest Province between the towns of Sonnieshof and Delareyville. The action is brought to you by series sponsor 4x4 Mega World in association with Propeller Centre, Firm Power Tools, Fila Africa, and Calex Sound Hire. As usual, competitors arrived early on Saturday morning, and soon the designated service point, the DSP, was a hive of activity. Incredibly enough, at the penultimate round of the series, a record 52 crews entered the event, all eager to get going and get those last few crumbs of points on the plate. With all the championship positions still up for grabs, it was anyone's race for top honours, and with a lot of new faces, there was a lot to play for. Whilst the core group of competitors were all present, there was still a lot of new faces and cars that had turned up out of the blue. The 4x4 Mega World Off-Road Championship Series has grown massively this season and now boasts the claim, with 52 entries, as the biggest off-road car racing series in Africa. Not only that, the quality of the drivers, crews and vehicles has gone through the roof. The top 10 all boasting a host of regional and national championships between them. That said though, the championships were still up for grabs across all of the categories. At this point, nothing was sewn up yet. With a totally new route ahead for the crews, the all-important competitors briefing was not to be missed, and the customary top 6 draw was to be dispatched. No one was wanting really to open up the road, so the number 1 draw eventually went to Richard Leek Jr. He was going to have clear air in the morning session, but also he was going to be the man that would have to go out and find the road alongside his co-driver Zahir Badanya in their ATS Ford Ranger. The prologue was going to be a 50-kilometre sprint, setting things up for the rest of the day and deciding the running order for the racing laps of 108 kilometres each in the main race. It was going to be a challenge for the crews, and the route, although set absolutely perfectly by the Baberspan Motor Club, was always going to be extremely challenging at this time of year. Bone dry, rocky and dusty. Before the penultimate event, we went down into the pits to find out a couple of reactions coming forward into this event.
Hi, I'm Ernest Roberts. I'm part of the Redline Motoring Adventure Racing team. We're here at Baberspan Hartsrivier 250. It looks like the Baberspan Motor Club marked this race, and they are known for marking a proper race. Nice and technical, old style racing. So we're really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be an awesome race.
Good morning, we are at Baberspan Hartsrivier 250 here in Northwest. It's a very nice, sunny, hot and a windy day. A lot of dust, but luckily the wind is from behind today. We're looking forward to a great event and a great result.
Yeah, we also just like to thank our sponsors, HiQ, Medistat from Polokwane, Kool-Aid Polokwane, Filterman Polokwane, Digital Ideas Polokwane and Green Sky for assisting us to getting to the race, helping us with the preparation of the vehicle. We hope it's going to be a good day of racing, and we're excited about it.
Okay, we're here at Hartsrivier 250. About 2 weeks ago we had a big accident with the car. Myself rolled the car on a test session. But luckily to all our sponsors and everybody that helped us, we need to say thank you. If it wasn't for them, we would not have been here.
I just want to thank our sponsors, namely KD Civil, Cesar Bantu, Rauco, Tanzanite, RMD, Stratalab, MMRB, Shemcrete and Starway, and also a good thanks to Jaco van Aert and Jan van Aert for the effort that they put in to get the bucket done in 3 weeks. Thank you very much to all you guys. Without you, we won't be here.
So with the formalities out of the way, it was time for the crews to get themselves ready for the first task of the day. Join us after the break when we see what went down, and obviously who was going to be pole going forward into the main event.
This week on KCC, we bring you what went down at the annual VW party that was held in Leondale, Ekurhuleni. This year's theme was VW
VW is a car that I'm passionate about. I think it merges both urban and hood, if that makes sense.
We are in the capital city, Pretoria, and we're hanging out with Tite from the Old School Car Club, and he tells us about his W108 Mercedes-Benz 280S.
This would be my fourth vintage out of the 22 cars that I've owned.
Durban spinners show us what they can do, and for the first time ever, we gave the public an opportunity to experience spinning, and we find out whether they loved it or hated it. I think you already know the answer to that one.
In this episode, Cody Garrettson travels from Oklahoma with his 73 Chevy Nova to take on Lance Carnegie from Wyoming in his 90 Fox Body Mustang. These racers have been trading punches on social media for years.
Bunch of overrated street cars.
Now they meet in Pueblo, Colorado to see who can back up their smack talk.
Do you need something to beat me? Did you really win, or did I just give you the race?
It's Oklahoma versus Wyoming as these two finally get to race heads up here on Grudge Race.
We welcome you back to Baberspan for the penultimate round of the TIORC, the Inland Off-Road Championship, brought to you by 4x4 Mega World. The crews now preparing to set themselves off on a 50-kilometer prologue. First car out would be the T96 ATS Ford Ranger of Richard Leek Jr. and Zahir Baranya. They would have the ineffable task of going out and opening up the road. No pre-run, and this was all going to be totally blind at full sprint pace. First car out is very rarely the car that posts the fastest time. They set themselves up nicely though, and would still be able to take up the chase, qualifying inside of the top 10, but it was not going to be pole position. But they were the first cars out to see a dustless 50-kilometer loop and get a taste and idea of the dry riverbeds that would host them later on in the main event. They were also first up to see how rocky the terrain was going to be. The winningest crew on the season were going to be up next. All eyes were going to be on Stefan Van Pletzen and Jaco Pieterse in the Live Lesotho Chenoweth. And the indication was the terrain would lend itself much better to the special vehicles rather than production cars. And they were certainly out there to give it their usual all. Could they upstage a host of Class T production vehicles this time and walk away with the overall event win once again? Time would tell. Already in the riverbeds, the unlimited suspension and massive tyres were showing that they were able to carry much more pace. Current Class T Championship leaders, the T5, in the road to Dakar colours of the privately entered Ford Ranger. Jacques Van Tonder, now back in with Sammy Redlinghuis, were out for a good showing after the mishaps at the previous event at the Stella 250. Not lacking in pace or reliability, this crew is destined for a great future in the sport, and we'll be watching their progress in the upcoming seasons. For now, a modest qualifier would also put them inside of that classic top 10 placing. A couple of mechanicals through the seasons, but always able to take up the chase. Next in the queue is going to be familiar faces with slightly unfamiliar machinery, normally in one of the Toyota factory machines. This time Shamir Variawa was out alongside his co-driver Jean Moore, who would take up co-driver duties on the qualifying day, and then come race day it was going to be all about San Saud to step up into the driver's seat. The factory Nissan was going to go out there to see what they could do. Unfortunately, they had their issues towards the end of the prologue. They were certainly on the pace to try and run up well inside the top 10, but a late roll just before the 50k marker put them way down the back of the pack, and they would have to come charging all the way through. Next up, another familiar face. This time along, it was Malcolm Koch on the wheel. France unable to navigate due to a little bit of schooling issues, so Henry Hugo, one of the most qualified co-drivers in the country, was having his chance to jump into it. Malcolm's only had the car a couple of months, but is certainly coming to grips with the left-hand drive setup of the former NWM factory racing machine. We'll see him in action later on in the season and going forward into next year. He says since he got the car, just wants to get comfortable with it, learn how it feels, and let it become part of the Koch family. A big threat coming into this event, as they have been the whole way through the tour, is Ernst Roberts and Henry Kerner. We can't really say they're newcomers to the sport, although they have had an incredible journey to get all the way almost to the very top of it. This time around, they were going to be challenging once again, not only for a win in category, but to try and win overall. They were certainly up against the wall this time around, as the terrain was clearly much more suited to the open wheels. But the JCP Steel Supplies 333 was going to be a big threat and would definitely be on the cards for a top 3, no doubt. A crew that have tasted a couple of steps of the podium, but as yet have not tasted the top of it. The younger of the Fender clan, this time around of the 4x4 Mega World crew, Dylan on the wheel and Donovan Lubber on the notes next to him in the navigator seat. They've just struggled to find their perfect form, but definitely when the pace has been there, they've been able to fight it out with the best. Today was not going to be their day though, as they had problems in the prologue and were out the back of the pack, hoping to find enough time to do the repairs and get up into the main race. Baberspan was not to be their day. Making appearance, and great to have them out at the 4x4 Mega World Inland Off-Road Championships, the regular Class S National Championship winners, and the crew that we have dubbed the Giant Killers throughout this season, because they can go out in a smaller vehicle, Class S, with less suspension, less horsepower, and beat some really big players in Class T, FIA, and the special vehicles. Huddy and Skitter were hoping for another win. They found the going incredibly tough, with the, as mentioned, very rough terrain, which was more suited to the bigger suspension of the special vehicles. The prologue didn't see them qualify at the front of Class S Brigade though, and they would be able to go out and see if they could pull the pin and climb the ladder later on in the day. Lots of the crews holding back something in the prologue, finding the going extremely tough. Another crew have certainly found their pace, and their top honours are waiting for them to get onto the top step. Force Prinsloo and Vermeulen, the combination has been unstoppable since they joined forces at the halfway mark of the season. Unfortunately, they had an up and down season though as well. Even for this event, it was touch and go whether they were going to make the lineup, as they had to rectify a niggly electronic fault and only arrived late on in the Friday, and they still had to make the long trek from Ermelo. For the side-by-side category, which has seen the biggest growth on the tour as far as classes go, they're always fast in qualifying, but having their problems and fair share of mechanical issues. Labuskakny and Putter were hoping for a clean run. Their aggressive driving style doesn't always help them out. They'll be looking to improve on their consistency and smooth their style out. Regular national runners, Sandra and Jaco Jonk, were out there once again in their Total Agri Porter. This was a big threat as well. Sandra, only getting into the driver's seat at the beginning of the season, has started to really become polished. They've gone through a ton of mechanicals at regional and national level, and now looks like they might have found the sweet spot. The last few races have not been kind to this pairing though, with a number of DNFs recorded. However, Willem is still leading the Class Ps and special vehicles overall, alongside Kelvin Riley. The championship may have slipped away from him, but the pace is definitely there. Never count these guys out to come charging through, no matter if they have a good or bad prologue. The P17, the most spectacular crew to watch. And the S2 were literally playing in their back garden. Coming into this race, Yanni and Peter Visser were in a close battle for the Class S Championship honours. With only one DNF on the season so far, could they hold on to their championship lead? Topping the Class S timesheets after the prologue was certainly a good start, and well expected as well. They know this terrain like the proverbial back of their hand. And in reality, it looks like the Class S2 could just simply find its own path. For the newly crowned national side-by-side champions, the G2 of Werner and Leon Mostert, they were going to go and see what they could do to have the perfect season. They've been extremely busy this year, competing in the National Championship Series, the 4x4 Mega World Inland Off-Road Championship, and they tackled the Kalahari Desert Race, which took place for a whole week, just before packing up, doing a quick rebuild, and loading the truck to come racing once again. And talking of guys that have been busy, having now acquired the Expedania Class A Gymco, the teaming of Smit and Peterson moved up from Class P all the way up into Class A now. They only received the car 2 weeks before the event, and with only a few testing kilometers under their belts, they kept a steady pace, still feeling out the car, trying to run a trouble-free prologue, qualifying a bit further down the order than they had hoped. But remember, this was a glorified shakedown for the new squad in the new car, and they were going to try and improve time by time, lap by lap, kilometer by kilometer. This was going to be an interesting one to watch out for in the A81. An interesting story for our crew in the D33. They certainly didn't make their lives easy coming up to this event. Navigator Gerry certainly made it tough as he rolled the bakkie a few weeks before the Baberspan Hartsrivier event whilst he was getting ready and locked and loaded. Not the ideal thing to do when you're chasing down a championship, but with a lot of help from their good buddies and lots of sweat and money as well, the bakkie was ready in time, just in time, to take on the prologue. They had their sights set on finishing the main event and certainly on the class podium, but they were also a little bit nervous, making sure the car was on point after the rebuild. Not in championship contention this season, Cobus Fourie and Philippe Leroux were hoping for a good showing. They did exactly that as well, qualifying in second place in Class P with nothing to lose, and they were ready now to take on the main event. The great story was an 11th overall would set them up in the sweet spot, remember, with over 50 crews. To make it into the top 10 qualifier was going to give you a perfect condition to go racing in the afternoon event. For the McInerney brothers, making the trips across the borders every single time to come out racing with us. They're in good shape for the championship and would be hoping to bring back more of the bacon, coming off 2 consecutive wins so far. The target was certainly on their backs though, and they qualified in a steady 3rd place in Class Ps. But remember, they had it all to lose and they didn't want to give any points away. A top 3 placing here would keep them in the championship hunt. For the defending overall production and Class D drivers champion, Lawrence was once again the leader in Class D standings after a slow start to the season, and the big D1 was starting to weigh a little bit heavy on his shoulders. With the rough route as it was, the crew took it easy. The goal was to finish the race rather than go for flat out speed. The penultimate round of the championship had a lot of crews biting their fingernails, not quite sure how to approach the event. And certainly the stories coming in after the 50k prologue were that it, as promised, was the roughest route of the season. For the G87, this has been a bit of a Cinderella story and one to watch for the future. Theo Erasmus and Edward Odendahl, late into the championship, late in the sport, and late into the season, have already come out as outright favourites every single time they line up. They qualified highest in the side-by-sides and 7th overall. For Christo Rose and Tion Swart, they had a prologue to forget. Both their GPS and tripometer units didn't work, which meant the only guidance they had were the markers on the track. To add insult to injury, their brakes were binding and keeping locking up as well. They had to stop 5 times in all in the prologue to try and remedy the situation. This put a massive dent in their qualifying, and obviously their chances of the race were starting to slip through their fingers with only 50k's counted so far. Crews were going to be hoping they didn't get punches and have to step out and fix them and deal with the local flora and fauna. Father and son, Pete and Benjamin Kutzer, have been improving all season long with every single event. One of the few teams in the championship as well to boast a 100% finishing record. They were looking to sustain that in their championship aspirations, and a nice and steady drive in the prologue put them right on track for the main race. 13th overall was the sweet spot. A 4th place qualifier was a great run coming out of Stijn Villiers and Peter van der Merwe. It's been cool to see some development happening on their twin-turboed, diesel-powered, belching Ford Ranger. But the car does like to run clean air, so a top qualifier was going to be key. They didn't put a foot wrong as well. 4th in class and 21st overall put them almost in the middle of the pack. For Tians de Toy and Arnold Norkia in the D11, still in with a chance for the championship glory. Driver Tians, this time paired with longtime navigator Norkia, was eager for a good showing in their propeller center Toyota Land Cruiser. Like most other crews in the bakkies, it was a case of steady as she goes and stay out of trouble. For Glenn Theron and Craig Galvin, they've gelled nicely since they moved across from production vehicles into their side-by-sides. The championship has been fun to watch as they developed their Cadillac Sound Higher Can-Am Maverick into full race condition. In car, you can see just how much these things do work, but also note how light these vehicles are over the rough ground. This shot in particular in the riverbed shows what a good chance all the side-by-sides we're going to have today. Always going to be running high in the prologue, certainly on a sprint 50k. For Dion Boyens and Cedrian de Villiers, paired up for the second time in 2019, the car had some mechanical issues at the last event and was only ready just a few days before this race, so they were hoping for a steady drive and the A25 to just play the game during the qualifier. For our ladies, the first ladies of our TIORC Championship, Suma Smith and Gabby Peterson, after their battery problems at the final event, They were hoping to just have a top finish. Third last time out, still with their issues at the Stella 250, so they showed they've got the pace. The pair have been fairly consistent this year as well when everything has gone their way, and they were looking for a top result in Class P for their championship standings come the end of the season. Their approach is methodical. Steady as she goes, not too worried about flat out pace. They will climb the ladder come race time. And for Ahmed and Khalil Hussein, newcomers to the event and the championship in the ex-Verna Kennedy Championship winning Class P Ace Co. So the car has got some pace, they just got to point it in the right situation. They were nervously excited to what lay ahead and were hoping for a good performance out in their new wagon. This is how things broke down after the 50 kilometers. It was Ernst Robertson, Henry Kerner putting 1 minute and 7 seconds into Stefan Van Pletzen and Jaco Pieterse. So they were going to try and run and hide come race time. Van Tonda and Redlinghuis were a solid third. And then look at 7th place, the fastest of the side-by-sides in the hands of Erasmus and Odendahl. DeToy and Riley had gone fastest, taking a number 5 position overall and the first of the Class Ps as we went further down the queue. After this, we went into the pits to get a couple of reactions from the top superstars and see what their thoughts were going forward into the 2 laps of the main event. First to chat to us was Richard Leake and Badania coming off their 6th in qualifying.
The prologue went okay for us. We had a clean prologue. We struggled a bit opening the road, which we knew was going to be the case. The roads aren't very, very clear, so I think now going through with a few tracks through will be a lot quicker. But otherwise we had a clean run, no issues with the car, so we're looking forward to it.
Much of the same. It was a bit tricky opening up the road. Lost about a minute and a half, I would say. But there'll be some roads now open, but the front guys got to find the new 50 k's of road, you know. So hopefully we can come back at them through that section.
Prologue, what a great prologue. I tell you, the guys at Baberspan have done a brilliant job marking this route out. Really suits the side-by-sides, very tight and twisty, going through the rivers. We had a good prologue, so I'm not sure we were placed yet, but we'll see how it goes in the main race. That's what counts.
We had a very good prologue, amazing race. In the river, I think about 20 k's really off-road. You know, we're enjoying those how can I say, undulations in the river, off camber, in camber, tight corners. We really enjoyed ourselves, never got out of time, so I'm just hoping our time was good.
Yes, we are here at Baberspan at Hartsrivier 200-250. We've just finished the prologue. for the Class E's, it's a bit tough, a bit rough, but we've enjoyed it and everything went smooth, so hopefully we've got better luck on the main race.
No, the prologue was quite technical, very rough, very nice. Something else, not flat out stuff. So yeah, I almost drive with your head today. So it's a long day, 220 k's. So we're starting 4th on the road, a few seconds out of each other. So yeah, no, very interesting. We'll hope it's a good day for us.
With the starting order decided then coming out of the 50k prologue, it was the simple matter of 2 racing laps to go. Join us after the break as things get close and tight in this penultimate round of the championship.
Tonight on Highway Patrol.
Here he is.
A man on the run from police.
Put your hand behind your back.
They're shocked by what they find.
Are you kidding me?
Whom's causing havoc, but there's a big price to pay.
$884 to pick it up.
And this man's t-shirt says it all.
And you have the audacity to turn around and tell it to stick it up me.
The Extreme Festival of National Motorsport features the South African single-seater championship, the Investchem Formula 1600s, and they travel with some of the top karters and single-seater drivers in the country. Joining them is the South African Superbike Championship, with the fastest riders on the fastest motorcycles on the fastest racetracks in South Africa. Only on Ignition, DSTV, Channel 189.
Welcome back to Baberspan as all the crews, the marshals, the medics and the spectators and supporters were getting themselves out there onto the sweet spot to go and get up close and personal with our TIORC top championship races. Remember, our biggest entry was going to be our busiest day at the office. 2 grueling laps lay ahead And one or two drivers were getting themselves into their zen state of mind. Remember, they were going to go off in real time, so a 1 minute 7 second lead was definitely going to be an advantage for the man off the front, and that was Ernst Roberts and Henry Kerner. For the 4x4 Mega World Inland Off-Road Championship race, we run in real time. And that means after the qualifying prologue, the time taken by the competitors determines not only their start position, but also the gaps between the cars. Real-time racing, no calculations at the end of the day. First man across the line is the winner. More often than not, dust becomes an issue as the gaps tend to close up outside of the top 3 or 4. But that's all part and parcel of the sport. Up close and personal, breathing the dust and sometimes the exhaust pipe of the man out front and trying desperately to make an early pass. With more than 50 cars starting on real time, the race line became somewhat of a busy place, resembling Joburg peak hour traffic. That's if you sprinkle a little bit of dust over the top of Joburg, that is. With the main race starting in the heat of the day as well, at the stroke of 12 o'clock, competitors not only had to deal with dust, but extreme heat conditions, which could have an effect on man, woman, and machine. Spare a thought as well for the special vehicles. No windscreen, no aircon, and just taking the dust straight into the teeth. There was a nice even spread of special vehicles and production vehicles as everyone started to get themselves out there, and the crews that had held something back in the morning 50 kilometers were now going to get their chance to really stretch their legs, unleash, and get the running going. It looked like in the early stages as well, the production vehicles were going to have a good chance of getting through the dust, obviously running the windscreen and air conditioner systems inside to make sure the crews can breathe and see in equal measure was definitely going to help them out going forward. And once again, highlights how important it is to get a good run going in the prologue. A couple of crews that held back too much were going to be suffering in the dust. Roberts was the first man out there then, and he had a 1 minute 7 second gap. Also a 1 minute 13 gap between second and third place. That was Stefan van Pletsen and Jaco Pieterse, along with Jacques van Tonda, along with Sammy Redlinghuis, which meant we weren't expecting too many changes to happen within the top 2 or 3. But the changes were going to come thick and fast outside of the top 15, where the times were extremely close, and we're expecting to see a couple of comeback drives. Fariawa, who had rolled his Nissan, was going to be in the comeback trail as well after qualifying outside of the top 30. So he was going to be charging as hard as he dare to try and come through the pack. And also, Jean Moore, who had done the duties to qualify, now handed across the notes to Saud to go out and see what he could do. Also, the crews that had their issues in the side-by-sides were going to be coming through and playing in the traffic, mixed in with a couple of Class D, E, and some of the older Class F buckies. The Class F buckies for us here at the TIORC are spectacular. They are the oldest buckies out there and still somehow able to bring it home every single time. For our old ladies teams, they're going to go out and see what they could do, and there was a bit of an in-house battle between our Class P runners, Suma Smith and Gabby Pieterse, and the B of the 101, Colleen Croshaw and Marina van Skalkvik. In fact, they were separated by nothing when they went out there, except a little bit of time. Rounding out the queue was going to be our Class F buckies as we got ready to take on the 2 full racing laps. Join us after the break to see what unfolded at the end of lap 1.
We have a brand new season of Celeb Rides coming your way. New cars, new celebs.
See them toes? Oh, it's the toes, isn't it? Let me skip away.
And new faces, of course.
This is a chrome car.
Like, how do you pull up the damn man for practice, bro?
Trust me, this is one season you don't want to miss.
You know, just for fun, please spell Lamborghini.
Lamborghini.
Out into the full race conditions, and here we go. This was time to get serious. For Yanni and Peter Visser, everything was going smoothly. Starting first in Class S and 8th overall, they soon worked their way up to 3rd overall on Loop 1, knowing the terrain well, and they were setting themselves up for one of their best overall drives, setting a brisk but steady pace. They could taste victory when, at the start of Loop 2, a front suspension part cried no more, leaving them stranded on the sideline, out of the race, and with that went their overall championship lead. The next crew to fall out after having a cracking time, check out this shot on the screen. Yeah, hard hit, the screen let go, and a little bit later on in the event, unfortunately, so did the car. So Viviers and Van der Merwe started to add themselves to the growing list, and it was going to get longer as the day got on, of early retirements and crews that unfortunately were not going to see the checkered flag here at Baberspan. On the season and on the last couple of years as well, Baberspan sets itself up as one of the best events, but also one of the toughest events on cars. If you can make the finish line, most of the time you're going to be on the podium. For the D11 crew of Tianson Arnold, they soldiered on merrily in their propeller center Land Cruiser, but also mechanical issues put an end to their race, and the crews were left with no points towards the end of their high championship aspirations. The D11 has been so solid and consistent, also crew and team, along with their vehicle, that have shown constant development. A shame to see them have to bow out of this one. For the P81 of Suma and Gabby, they were running steady as always. They found the going tough, but kept on going into the second loop of the race, lying 4th in Class P. It wasn't to be, however, as 30 kilometers into the last loop, the engine and gearbox suffered terminal overheating problems. The crew, before the thing absolutely let go, decided to withdraw, adding them once again to the growing list of DNFs. For the Fs that never ever seemed to stop going, the husband and wife pairing of Gert and Madeline Stein were out there as the only finishers in Class F, also as the last finishers of the day come the end of play. Some of these Class Fs are built a little bit tougher than others. Check out the original spec Toyota Hilux. Toyota, what did the old advert go? Everything keeps going right. For our remaining crew of our all-ladies squad, Colleen Croshaw and Marina van Skalkwyk, they were out there surviving runners in the Class Bs, keeping a steady pace while their championship competitors fell by the wayside. Slow and steady often brings the bacon, and this is the game that the B101 crew like to adopt, certainly when the terrain gets as tough as it is in Baberspan. This result may see them improve on their own championship aspirations as well. Back in action after rebuilding the bakkie following a roll earlier on in the season, Jaco Viersa and Gili Roux were out there, and they encountered a few issues along the way, but they did manage to soldier on, and they eventually reached the finish line 5th in Class D and 27th overall. In fact, come the end of play, there were only 29 competitors out of over 50 that did see the checkers come the end of the day, showing just how tough the terrain truly was. More than a quarter of the field out there in the fields, trying to pick up the pieces of their event and their championship. For the E1 of Andre Geldenhuys and Victor Fincham, their defending Class E champions had a season to forget. Baberspan Hartsrivier was no exception. This time, a broken tie rod end that put a premature end to their event. Coming up on their wheel and able to make a nice easy pass with the brothers Mostert, Werner and Leon. They also encountered issues later on in the event, but still put in a sterling run to get them home in 26th overall. We'll get a nice shot of them later on and just show how tough their day was. But the reigning national champions battled with consistency throughout the 4x4 Mega World TIORC event, with less wins than they were expecting. For Aki and Jean-Andre Kruger in the E7, they kept their 100% finishing rate intact for the season by overcoming their own mechanical issues to slowly limp their way home, coming 4th in class and 25th car home come the checkers. Class F and Class E bakkies having the toughest and roughest day in the seat. When they got out at the end of the day, Most of these guys were about 2 or 3 inches shorter, having taken a big pounding by the rough terrain and the rocks. For Dion and Cedrion, they had a smooth prologue, but that was where it ended. Issues in the main event, including overheating, no intercom, and a broken accelerator cable. But even that couldn't stop them. They qualified well, and even though they plummeted, they didn't drop out of the finishes. It was a 3rd place in Class A and a 24th place overall, showing that strong prologue result did save them and kept them in the race. All the time lost and still able to bring it home on the lead lap. After a great qualifier for Jacques Van Tonder and Sammy Redlingace, they suffered a string of mechanicals whilst running well inside the top 10. Eventually, they managed to limp their car home 4th in class and 23rd overall. But the crew that were looking to try and nail down their championship lost their Class T championship lead in the process, and now they've got it all to play for at the final event that counts for double points. They do like to go in with a bit of pressure to the last race. We'll watch to see what Van Tonder and Redlingace can do in just over a month's time to try and claw back the points that they lost here at Baberspan. The father and son pairing of Tinus and Tian were back in action after Tinus recovered from a broken wrist sustained at the end of last year. Winning is always great, and to get the Class B win on returning after a lengthy layoff was truly the cherry on the cake. Certainly competitors falling out will have aided the B52 charge to the top, but as they say with cross-country racing, to finish first you've got to finish. Christo and Tian had their brake issues as well as trip meter malfunctions in their side-by-side. Here they were overtaken by a charging from behind once again, Willem de Toy. They kept pushing on though, to try and get to the finish, stopping umpteen times to bleed the brakes and driving with no GPS or trip meter. Still, they managed to get 3rd in Class G and a 21st overall. Just showing some real tough spirit to bring the G22 all the way to the line, no matter what. Like to see these guys develop as well. It's been a good season for them, and they've also been busy racking up the miles, hitting a couple of the tours along the way. A podium will have made them feel oh so good after having to deal with all those issues. A short tussle between the G11 of Marcus Labuschagne and the D25 of Hein Kruger shows how much more comfortable the side-by-sides are over the rough terrain versus a Class D Bucky. Marcus and Neil unfortunately scored another DNF. The crew's aggressive driving style unfortunately putting too much pressure on the moving parts. He is entertaining to watch, but he really knocks the hell out of that side-by-side. One day when it can all hold together, he'll walk away with the win. In car here, checking things out with Hein and Paul in their Class D Hilux to put things into perspective. Hein and Paul eventually came home 4th in Class D and 20th overall. Oh, those hits, you can really feel them. D25 just muscling their way through. Car, driver and navigator battered and bruised, but keep on trucking. Also in the bone dry conditions, if you look through the screen, very hard to spot all the markers, and that is why the navigator is so important in these events, to be on point and on the notes. Sure, there's a couple of markers out on the track, but it's the navigator that points you in the right direction, tells you exactly where you're headed. For Lawrence and Marnie, they took a relatively easy run on the route. They were rewarded with a 3rd in Class D and a 19th overall, doing their championship aspirations a world of good. Their strategy to simply stay out of trouble and bring home the finish was paying off. The D1, for the first time, holding a lot back, just trying to get those points on the plate. As we've said so many times on this tour, and especially at tough events like this, it's the clever man that brings home the bacon. Regan Austin and Warren Voss had a decent run and finally ended up with a decent finish after a season that's been plagued by mechanical issues. Could be something to do with the curse of changing the colours on the car. This day ended with a 2nd in Class D and a rock-solid 18th overall. Probably not as high up as they were hoping to climb, but still, points. creates prizes. Those are the crews that were still running. Join us after the break to see who made it up into the magical top 17.
Let's get to income property making.
Scott McGillivray leads buyers through the house hunt and renovation of their first income property.
I expect you to pound a hole through the floor with a sledgehammer.
I feel like I'm at the carny.
Holy smokes, and she's the strong one?
Using his triple threat expertise in real estate renovation and finances, he'll turn their real estate investment into a sleek and smart income property.
Oh my gosh, it looks stunning. Wow. Everything looks gorgeous.
Music to my ears.
Thank you.
What about the backsplash?
Stunning. And look how spacious this is.
Be sure to catch Income Property. It's only on the Home Channel.
The TRP National Motocross Series runs 8 championship rounds throughout the country. And all of South Africa's top riders, right from 50cc's up to the incredible 450cc MX1 category, go out to win national championship honors at the end of the season. And you'll catch all this action only on Ignition, DSTV, Channel 189.
So out of Baberspan, who was still on track and who was running to try and get those points inside the top 17? Well, the answers come thick and fast now. Dirk Putter and Henny Hutting kept their Class E and overall championship hopes alive with a stunning 3rd place in Class E and a 17th overall. The dice for the top 3 in Class E was a tough affair, as always, probably one of the closest we have seen on the 2019 tour. Class E has given us close races, and because of that, one of the closest championships. It's going to be a nail-biter when we go into the double-header for points come the end of the season. Despite bemoaning the rough terrain after the prologue, Francois and Gerry put in a stellar performance to finally clinch the top step of the Class D once again and came home in 16th overall. This performance also put them in with a chance for the championship honours. As the last event of the year has double points on offer, this could well be one of the surprise turnarounds and results of the season. Their steady approach to the beginning of the weekend set themselves up nicely. D33 came into the season as a championship hopeful. It looked like it may have gone too far down the road, but slowly they're bringing it back. For our side-by-side crossovers, it's been great to see the G110 get faster and smoother and more consistent as the season goes on. Glenn Turon and Craig Galvin in the Calyx, Sound Higher, Can-Am Maverick had a tough race, but everything came together nicely in the end as they recorded their highest position so far this season since moving to the side-by-side class, a stunning 2nd place in Class G and a high 15th overall. The pairing are really gelling nicely now, and it's only a matter of time till we see them on the very tippy top step. On board once again, you can almost taste the dust. Remember, no screen, no protection. All the dust and roost of the cars that make the pass goes straight into your face. The E11 of Rudolph Patoy and Ben Sutherland were involved in one of the greatest battles for class honours we've seen in a long time, and they eventually came home 2nd in Class E. There was just over a minute in it at the end. Nail-biting stuff, and a credible 14th overall was their just rewards. The Propeller Centre crew seem to have found that sweet spot in the E11 once again. Nice to see it. With so many races on the tour, plenty of testing and development. Sometimes those last few events can be the best. For Johan Wieser and Jerry Besson, they did everything right and were in the thick of things throughout the whole race, but in the end, it was lucky number 13th overall and the coveted win in the hotly contested Class E battle went to these guys. Good shot on the side here as well, just showing how fast the pace can be running. The average speed on each of the laps of just over 100 kilometers was around about 65 kilometers an hour. Testing tech terrain, but when you could unleash, you could really drop the hammer. With the demise of Jannie and Peter Visser, Pete and Benjamin Kotzer clinched a deserved second place in Class S, and now, with it, extended their championship lead. Handy 12th overall, with nothing to be sneezed at, and the pairing kept, once again, their 100% finish ratio intact as they head to the final 2 double point scoring events of the season. The S11 has been large and in charge this season. After qualifying well inside of the top 10, Theo Rasmus and Edward Odendahl, the G87 seemed to have found that sweet spot of aggression and consistency. They took the Class G win in style and with it an 11th overall. This set them up nicely going forward, and again showing how important the prologue is, especially for our side-by-side campaigners. We have seen them run inside the top 10 this time around. With new blood coming to the sport, I'm so excited to see what these guys can do for next season. For the brothers Andrew and Keith McInerney, they pushed hard but had a few issues along the way. Nonetheless, as they have done on the season, they scooped a well-deserved podium placing, 3rd place in Class P, and remained inside the top 10 overall. The McInerney's in the TIORC 4x4 Mega World Championship have found the sweet spot of consistency, form, and speed. Likewise for Kobus Fourie and Philip Leroux. They chased hard for the win, but in the end had to settle for the runner-up spot in Class P and a stunning single-digit 9th place overall. This high result of the Class Ps proving once again what was expected at the event, and that was that the special vehicles, even the ones down on power, were going to be faring much better in the testing rough terrain of Baberspan. After nearly missing out on starting this race, Vos Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen had a tough day to claim that 3rd place in Class T and had a decent run to 8th overall. All the day that had been waiting for that niggly electronic problem to come in, it never showed his face, but still looked like it may have just made the crew nervous enough to hold something back. Vorsi definitely has the pace in the T41 to challenge a little bit further up, but he didn't have the perfect prologue, and because of that, didn't have the perfect race. 3rd place in Class T is still a good number though. Early event electrical issues dropped this crew down the order, but as always, we do love to see the P17 of Detoy and Riley come charging through, and charge through they did, in style as well. They came through a ton of crews to get themselves up there to take the 1st in Class P and a brilliant 7th overall. Had it not been for their mechanicals, this crew could well have been challenging for a top 3 overall. Toy and Riley do love to put on the show for us here at the TIORC. Not the most powerful vehicle, but I love to watch him just carry that corner speed. Shamir Variawa, and now with his son Saud on the notes, they had a decent day overcoming the problems that they had with a little rollover in the prologue. They had to charge all the way through the pack as well, make a ton of passes. They eventually brought it home 6th overall and walked away with the win in the National Invitational class. A nice comeback drive for the 323, and great to see Saud on the notes enjoying his time alongside with Dad, who was no doubt in the zone at the Baberspan event. The Giant Killers retain their mantra as well. The S14 of Dave Huddy and Gerrit Skitter in the Class S Hud Speed Navara did all the good work in the prologue to get themselves set up nicely, and they walked away with a number 5 overall, beating out some key players and taking the 1st in Class S. Strong run coming out of this pair. They'd have hoped for a top 10. They were rewarded justly with a top 5. Pre-season and pre-event favourites this time around, though, it was not to be. Stefan Van Pletsen and Jaco Pieterse picked up a few problems, something that they've been able to avoid the rest of the season. They still ended up 2nd in Class A and 4th overall, but they were looking to try and nail down another win come the end of the event. They're still in good shape as far as the championship goes, but they don't like losing, so watch out for them to come back fired up for the double points final round. These shots certainly show the suspension working a treat. It took the checkers that had been relatively happy with their run, still walking away with points and podiums. But the win this time around going to their combatants, and the first win since they joined up as husband and wife pairing, with Sandra Labiskakny-Jonk on the wheel and Jaco Jonk on the notes. The Total Ag reporter did an absolute stormer. They were unstoppable as they took a 3rd overall and their first class win in Class A. They were more than chuffed with how the day had gone, and it all came about because of that rock and roll drive they did in the prologue. That victory would have been a sweet one. As far as the overalls went, it was a 2-horse race between Malcolm Koch, who had been on fire the whole way through the race. He actually led on the road into the final lap, and then he was starting to get closed down towards the end by Ernst Roberts. A nail biter had us set up between the might of the Ford and the Nissan. It was anyone's game going into the final couple of kilometers. Eventually, a mistake from Malcolm along with Henry. They got a little bit confused and hesitant going into one of the sectors where Ernst and Henry just decided to dive on in the hole, made the pass and ran off the front, eventually pulling out almost a 5-minute gap. And the penultimate win of the season going to an on-fire Ernst Roberts and Henry Kerner. Hats off though to Malcolm Koch and Henry Hugo. They came oh so close in the end, and they're still being relatively happy with a number 2 spot. But the story was one of our closest last couple of kilometers for the overall and for the production vehicles. Hats off though to Ernst and Kerner seeing the flag first. While some were celebrating, the others were coming home either on the meat wagon, a little bit further down the order than they wanted, or coming home with incredible injuries to the car. One by one though, they did come home, and whoever made it home were going to walk away with a ton of points. Baberspan once again delivering some tough conditions. So let's go through the classes. Special A's was won out by Sandra and Jaco ahead of Van Pletsen and Pieterse, with Boyens and de Villiers. Then Class P, De Toy and Riley got the job done ahead of Ferry, LaRue and the Macanettis. Onto the Class Bs then. Tinas and Tion did a great job as well, and with it the B52 had their best ever overall. And no big surprise in the special vehicle overalls, Sandra and Jaco on the top of the charts. Look at De Toy and Riley though in their Class P, charging up to a 3rd overall, really setting the track on fire. In production Class D, Van Wyk and Roo topped the charts ahead of De Toy and Norkia, with Van der Walt and Prinsloo in 3rd. And in E's, De Toy and Sutherland beat out on Patra and Hutting and the Krugers. Class G's, a stellar win coming out of Erasmus and Odendaal to beat out a resurgent and their highest finish ever for Tehran and Galvin, and Rose and Swat finishing and rounding out the podium. And in production vehicle Class T's, the big story, the winners overall, Ernst Roberts and Henry Kerner beating Koch and Hugo, and Prinsloo and Vermeulen. Class S, Huddy Speed, Dave Huddy and Gerrit Skitter beating out on the Kotzers and the Fissers. And production overall put Roberts and Kerner on the top of the charts, with Koch and Hugo chasing them down. Look at the result from Huddy and Skitter as the top of the Class S. A nice comeback ride from Prinsloo and Vermeulen, and the Kotzers squeaking onto the overall board. At the end of play then, at the penultimate round of the TIORC Championship campaign, a lovely sunset to roll things out. Smooth waters, but it was a rough race here as always. Baberspan delivering one of the toughest events of the season. Those who stood up at the end of play to collect their trophies knew they'd been working hard for it, and great prizes from Firm Power Tools along with a ton of lucky draws. At this stage, everyone was going to be getting their trophies, but all eyes were thinking about in just over a month's time when we moved to the Malopo 500 on the 8th and 9th of November to wrap up the championship. Everyone was thinking about those final points to see if they're going to have it in hand to be able to walk away as inaugural TIORC 4x4 Mega World Champions for 2019. It's been an amazing season. It's almost done and dusted. There are just double points left around the corner in Vryburg. We're going to be heading up there. We'll bring you all of the coverage, and at that round, we'll be able to name our 2019 champions in classes and categories alike. To Baberspan, thanks once again for hosting us. To Firm Power Tools, incredible gifts. Thank you for all the lucky draw prizes. And then to all of the crews who have hung tough with us for the 4x4 Mega World TIORC Championship. Hang tough. There is just a few more corners to go, and we'll be able to wrap up the championship for 2019. So one more sunset and one more race with double points. Vryburg just around the corner.